Good evening, good to have you with us in this edition of the Urban Debate. Viewers, a few months ago, we got your horrifying story from Mumbai, in one of the poor schools in Mumbai, about the kind of social media chats that are going on between teenagers, from body shaming to objectifying and even talking about rape and gang rape. Some of the stuff that gets discussed between the teenagers, between the students in our metro cities today is horrifying. Some of you may have noticed in the last couple of days, there is this locker room chat that has been doing the rounds. Horrifying excerpts of conversations that have happened in a group, in an Instagram group chat with about 100 schoolboys in Delhi. Now, as this news came about and hit the social media, there were complaints that were filed, and even before that, the Delhi police itself took suo motu cognizance to look into that matter. Let me really tell you how this started. A young girl, a student, actually shared some of these screenshots of that Instagram chat on her own Twitter profile. And she said she had found out that this is what some of the boys, including some from her school, had been discussing on one chat group. She claimed that a group of South Delhi teenage boys were involved, that they are objectifying girls, they are morphing their pictures, including hers, and she was horrified to see that, to find out what had been done. She also said that there were two boys from her own school who were part of this group. Now, one student has been taken into custody, many others are being questioned. Let me take you some of the chilling conversations that happened in this group. Very casually called locker room chat. But that's not what really it is, and that's not what it should be called at all. Chat set 1. There is one student, one youngster, who says, "We can rape her easily. I am serious." Another one says, "We can do many things easily. Doesn't mean we will." This is the second guy who's trying to just bring it down by saying we won't, but we can do it easily. We can rape her easily. They're obviously discussing a girl whose picture has been shared and is now being analyzed in great detail. The first boy says, "Let's do. Call her. I will come wherever you are. In fact, let's call 2-3 more boys. We will together gang rape her." Thankfully, there is one person there who says no. Now, somebody in this group did leak some of these chats, and that's how a young girl teenager found out about it. I want to tell that one person who was in that group, good for you, and thank you for sharing this. Thank you for leaking this. In fact, you should be taking a clearer stand with your colleagues and your friends and the other guys in that group. And I hope there are more like you who find the courage to stand up and say no, who find the courage to report this, who find the courage to bring this dirt out, because that's the only way we can react to it and we can stop this. This is not the only instance, like I told you. There are hundreds of such instances that are currently out there. Examples. If you're a parent of a teenager, find out. If you're a student, you probably know lots more stories than I do or anybody else does. I will quote one example, the one that we highlighted a few months ago. In that, parents found violent, sexually explicit WhatsApp chats. 8 students between the age of 13 years and 14 years were actually involved in this kind of a dirty chat. They were talking about one-night stands. Gang bang was the word that was actually used. Raping their own classmates, cracking jokes about gang rape. As this story had come out at that point, and after a lot of pressure from parents and from those who picked up on this story, 8 students were suspended. You have to keep in mind the kind of impact this also has on other students, especially on girls. In that case, few girls were scared to go to school for days together. They skipped school. They did not know how to deal with this situation. Let's keep in mind, viewers, we are not talking about any hardened criminals. We are talking about youngsters, teenagers, in that impressionable age between 12 and 17 who are indulging in these kinds of conversation and who obviously believe that it's all right, it's cool, and it's normal. And tonight I want to talk about this. Tonight, one more time, I want to have this conversation because we need to know where we're going wrong. As parents, as a society, as teachers, as those running academic institutions, what is it that we're teaching our children right now? And if there is a regulation aspect that needs to be brought in. So let's say good evening to those who are joining me on this conversation. Professor Vijay Raghavan, he is with the Center for Criminology and Justice with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences. Dr. Deepak Raheja, Senior Psychiatrist and President for the Delhi Psychiatric Society. Mr. Neeraj Kumar, former Commissioner of Delhi Police. Kalyani Chaudhary, she's the Principal for Billabong High International School in Thane in Maharashtra. Professor Sanjeev Sonawane, Regional Secretary West for the Indian Association of Teachers Educators. I've also got a parent of a young teenage girl who's agreed to speak to us. It's very difficult, I know, and even more so difficult to reveal your identities because of the society, the peer pressure, but it's important to hear your voice. I thank the parent who's actually joined us, but before I go across to her, I actually want to speak to Kalyani Chaudhary first. Kalyani Chaudhary, what's happening amongst our youngsters? These Instagram, WhatsApp, Twitter chats, the kind of conversation, the mindset it reflects, where are we going wrong?
Good evening, Tanvi. I think we are not going wrong anywhere because we as institutions believe that transformation is the only way that society comes up, society evolves. So these are millennials and they are a new generation who are being brought up on gadgets. We cannot take the gadgets away from them, but we can definitely teach them what they have to use it for. And in schools, that's what we do. We tell them what is right, we tell them what is wrong, we tell them to do it for themselves, to understand. Only when they do something wrong, they understand that it was wrong. Yes, definitely the incident that has happened is horrifying, is shocking, beyond belief, but we cannot shirk responsibility. But how do we bring them to the mainstream? It's dialogue. Having lots of conversations, open conversations with these teenagers is going to help us and the teenagers. So we are open as parents, as teachers, as educators, as policy makers. I think it's our responsibility to open up a dialogue with the teenagers.
But do we have those kinds of dialogues? That's the most important part.
Yes, absolutely.
Dr. Deepak Raheja, you know, we are still so we're still so iffy about having conversations about basic sex education. I don't know what kind of moral education or conversations about what's right, what's not, where to say yes, what words to use, how to respect others. How does this get included in our education today?
So I do agree that the way forward should be a dialogue, but the dialogue or the experimentation cannot and should not happen at the cost of violating the basic security and sense of integrity of people around. And so in that context, I think this experimentation or this method of learning is highly objectionable. But I do agree that we can't just put all the blames on these children, because I also do think that this is the tip of the iceberg, even though we don't want to and should not want to generalize and start living in a fear that all our children are going wrong. But I still do want to highlight here that this may just be the tip of the iceberg, because this got noticed and got reported, and so we are hounding these children and they're going to face huge consequences. But it is it is unfair to put all the blame onto them. I think it is a collective responsibility of the society, and where we are headed for. And are we willing to take the risk of letting our children learn by experimentation, by objectifying, by demeaning, by putting the basic security of women, the girls that they are talking about? And like you rightly said, these are not criminal. These are very young, juvenile, very naive and very fragile children. So I think the society needs to wake up and take responsibility collectively of the parents and the homes that they grow up in, the schools that they get education in, the society that they see around, the role modeling, the vicarious learning, what kind of role model we are able to provide for them. So I think all of these things collectively need to be evaluated. I think it's unfair to just have a knee-jerk reaction whenever such an episode comes in light. We have debates, we have discussions, it gets reported, and then it gets forgotten because we believe that it's not happening in my own home. But I think we need to wake up to the fact that these children are children that we could identify as our own. This could possibly be happening in our home or may happen in our homes, and we need to wake up. We need to, I think, the basic, like you said, sex education, the respect for the fairer sex. I mean, the children, the male child needs to be role modeled how to be able to respect the daughter. I think we need to create equal opportunities for our sons and daughters, because I think that's where the mirroring will start. And I think those are the foundations we need to go back to. Certainly, we can't prevent our children from using gadgets, but I think it is our responsibility to be able to showcase to them how to be able to use them responsibly.
Hmm. No, I agree with you. The point is that, like you said rightly, every time one such case comes out, we talk about it, we discuss it, we say of things that should be done, but I don't see that happening. I don't see too many parents or teachers taking the initiative of, you know, explaining this to the youngsters, having conversations with the youngsters about it. Professor Sonawane, in fact, there have been few cases that I personally know about where the first reaction from schools and even in some cases from parents has been to brush it under the carpet. It's been a few handful of people who wanted to fight to ensure that this comes out and gets addressed, that there is, counseling or punishment, and acknowledgement that this is going on and it has been caught. But largely we see hesitance from especially the schools in even acknowledging that this is happening.
Hello, can you hear me?
Professor Sanjeev, can you hear me? Yes, go ahead, please.
Yeah. See, actually, these two incidents only surfaces these things, but and these children got only the platform at the Instagram to misusing the social media, but even others on the corners at the short leaves and leaves in the campus of the school. These children are talking about all these things. But due to this misusing and coming on and preparing this group on the Instagram, these things are surfaced and caught in evidence way. But the problem is that here, the my previous who they had expressed very well way that the what is going on in the society, it is reflecting in the in the students' thinking and all this thing. Lot of exposure they had received from so many ways. But even though we have to find out a way in this regarding, as All India Teacher Educators Association is now emphasizing on formulating a policy by training the teachers, especially in this situation, what role the teacher has to play. It may be a counseling, it may be a how to report to the higher authorities, principals, and how to report, communicate to the parents. And another thing is that the regarding the designing the policy by the National Council for Teacher Education, giving training to the teachers in service, or also also in the pre-service training during that. What the teachers can play a excellent role in that to prevent all these things. How they can handle the children's doing this. And when the changing the minor changes in the behavior of the children's, even though noticed it, and how to infer it, uh, interpret it, and then through that to notice to the higher authority. This is the thing. And teacher need to give the training, because these things are coming up. Teachers see that they only a role of teaching into the classroom, conducting the examination and all these things, but they have to look beyond this. Another thing is that the what type of policy will be there, and what will be the definition of misuse of a social media, in that what activities actually are classified in that, and then what will be the measures to prevent all these things, that to be considered in the policy. And this policy will be come out with that, and it will become a part of a teacher education, so that teachers can play a role in that to prevent all these things. Another thing is that the like a sexual harassment and ragging, there are good regulations. You rightly at the initially introducing said that what type of regulation to be introduced regarding this. Yes, the concern has to take the initiative regarding to have a regulation regarding this, and the do's and don't. If you misuse it, what you have to face. This awareness should be given to the students
Okay.
at the school, at the schools. Also, at the All India Teacher Educators Association, every year conduct a professional development program of the teachers. In that, we will now surely include one of the sessions, and expert will be called that how to handle these situations by the teachers, and what type of role they can play when to prevent this type of incidences.
Okay, all right. Some of the steps that can be taken, but let me see if I can, go across to the parent of the student, the young teenage girl who's joining us right now. It's not just about boys having these locker room chats. I think it's a generational thing, or maybe it's just the fact that they now have this personal gadget that makes it easier for them to have these conversations with all the global exposure. But, in your experience, what's going on? Why are these youngsters thinking and talking in this manner?
Hi, Tanvi. Can you hear me?
Hi. Yes, we can. Go ahead, please.
Yes. So, as sad and miserable it is to keep talking about this incident because it kind of makes us relive it. What happens is that, right in the beginning, you mentioned that, uh, people don't want to talk about it. Along with it, I want to add that there is one more thing that kids today know, that they are smarter than their parents when it comes to usage of social media. And they know that they are not going to get caught. So that is one important thing where they feel that they have a free hand. Neither the schools, nor the teachers, nor the parents are savvy with regards to, I mean, they may be on Instagram, but they don't know these kind of groups. They don't understand, and they are in complete denial. Especially the parents are in complete denial about even acknowledging the fact that this is the exposure level of their kids. So only if they would know that their kids are so well exposed today, and you cannot stop it, you cannot monitor it, because if you stop Netflix, they will watch it on something else. If you stop that, they'll watch it on, I mean, it's an open world today and a connected world. So there will be influences of every kind. And since the parents would be in denial, um, thinking that their kids are innocent and they are not the kinds of, the kids who would indulge in something like this, they do not understand that at what level these kids have moved. And
I mean, as a parent, I would like to say that it's not just about the kind of crass language that is used, which is so commonplace with them. It is about not just about objectifying, not just about rape. It moves on to far greater things, talking about, I mean, the names of the groups begin with hate, hate on so and so kid. How can you have, I mean, what goes on in the mind of a teenager to even begin a group which begins on the word hate? And while I understand that at some level, I don't know what influences have made these teenagers feel that they would sound so cool by talking about these things. It's just also the also a free hand that they are getting when they know that their parents will not say much since they are in denial, and the school will obviously, which is what happened in our case too, that the school will brush it aside. It is only and only when I had to remove had to send an email putting down POSCO acts and putting down, sections under which the school is also a stakeholder. Did they decide to, take a step? Otherwise, for a week went by where the school said that, this is happening outside the school. So we do not have any control over it. And it also gives us a revelation that it's not just about the school and the parents, it's collectively the whole environment will make the kids open up to these things, understand these things, and you cannot stop it. The only thing to do is to have an open conversation with the kids and not take them on face value at all.
Can you take our viewers through, briefly just tell us what happened in the case that you were referring to in your own experience?
So, in my experience, I will like to mention that there was one of the forums used, like WhatsApp and like Instagram. I don't want to mention which one, but one of the forums used to create a group, like every other incident that we've heard of in Bombay or now in Delhi. A forum is used, a group of people get together, there's personal vendetta there, and someone or the other becomes an object of, I would say, ridicule first, and then hate, and then objectifying that person. In this case, it so happened to be someone known to me. I don't want to mention whether it was my daughter or, probably you put it. I mean, that's really unimportant. Today it's my daughter. Tomorrow it would be someone else's daughter. That part is unimportant. But what is important is the fact that once this happens, your child will come back to you and may find you in a position where you have to take a call of what do you want to do about it. And it was extremely saddening for me to understand that the step that I had to take after this happened was and my first reaction too was to, just leave it aside. But in the next 10 to 20 minutes that followed, where I started understanding and reading the body language, I realized that this is not something small. And what kind of an example will I be setting by letting this just go? So I had to take a call, and I said that okay, I cannot. So
Correct.
the first thing I did was put it on the parents group and said okay, this is, and put a screenshot. And the minute I put the screenshot of the kind of conversation that happened, I was shocked and appalled with the behavior of parents, where the first reactions that I started getting was about, oh my, and this is not on the group, this is separately. My God, you are so brave that you are putting this up. How am I brave? It's shameful for the rest of the class. This was, I mean, everybody, this is what you should be doing. You should be making the others aware that this is what your kids are up to. I mean, if one kid is posting this, there are 20 others who are liking it. So it's not about my child or your child.
Correct.
It is about the rest of them as to why are they even liking or, commenting or sharing something like this. So that was extremely appalling for me to see that there were, I mean, parents did not have the guts to put it on the group and separately or privately write to me and mention that this was very brave. And I felt it was the only logical thing to do. And after which I had to write a mail to school to say that, something like this is happening and you cannot, we understand that the kids are there with you for a couple of hours and are there at home for a far longer duration.
Correct.
But at the same point in time, you cannot just be in complete denial that no, something like this is not happening. And sadly our
You know
the
what
schools
happens
and the
more often
teachers.
than not that I've seen in such cases is that the schools and the teachers will say it's not our responsibility, it's up to the parents. The parents will blame the school because that's where they go and spend a lot of time, and that's where they meet these other youngsters. And somehow at the end of it, what happens is nobody is teaching the child, the youngster, the teenager, on what's right and what's not, and what could be the consequences of what you're saying, and how this is not normal and this is not cool and it's not acceptable. Somewhere we're missing that point. And one of our panelists said it. I said it in the beginning. Where are we going wrong? And I want to emphasize on this because I'm not sitting here and blaming and villainizing the 14-year, 15-year-olds. It's not really their fault. Maybe nobody told them what's right and what's not. Maybe the parents want to live in denial or want to protect their own child. Maybe the schools just want to protect their own reputation and get great marks and put it on the board to say, look how many toppers we've got. But somewhere the system is failing. And Professor Raghavan, I don't even think it's that much of a problem because of the medium. Yes, these children have these gadgets today, but let's be honest, locker room chat as a phrase actually came about from 30 years ago or even longer. And so it's not about where you're doing this chat, it's about what you're saying.
Yeah, thank you, Tanvi. In fact, it's very interesting that this particular chat was called the locker room chat. And we all know which famous person justified his behavior, calling it locker room chat. So, what are the kind of role models we have today in our society? The point that I want to make here is that, every time an incident like this happens and it gets exposed, we are all shocked beyond our wits. But I, for one, I'm really not surprised when something like this comes to light, because it really strikes at the heart of the way in which boys and girls are brought up in our society. What kind of socialization do we, our children go through, where women are seen as commodities and that they are objects of desire and objects of sex. And the other thing that I think is very relevant here is that when it comes to boys when they are growing up, particularly in their late teens, it's also a lot of playing of masculinities that is going on around here. And some of it is also, to an extent, showing off to each other in terms of who is more masculine than the other person. In fact, many years back in the late 60s, there was a very well known sociologist called Miller who had written about this theory called the focal concerns theory, in which he precisely says that as a part of growing up, young men and boys get into playing of masculinities, where they talk about where the culture that prevails in many male-dominated cultures is that of he talked about 6 focal concerns: trouble, smartness, toughness, thrill, and fate, dependence on fate. So basically, these are the kind of values and norms which are encouraged, and it's all seen as part of growing up. In fact, very often we turn a blind eye, parents as well as teachers and members of the society. When some things like this is happening, we see, okay, ye to hota hai, this is part of boys, their boys will be boys, kind of a phenomenon. But the moment something crosses a certain boundary, like it has happened in this case, where they are talking about raping girls, etc., that's when we suddenly become holier than thou and become highly moralistic. And then, of course, there's some amount of labeling that also takes place. Because now what's typically going to happen is, instead of going to the root cause of the whole issue and try to analyze and look at what are we doing as a whole, as a society, we are going to end up blaming these kids. And we're going to bring them under the wing of the criminal justice system. They're all going to be, many of them will be processed, would be sent to under the Juvenile Justice Act, and some of them might even get punished for what they're doing. And then we would feel that the problems are all solved and things are back to normal. But unfortunately, this is happening all around us, and we are simply not prepared to deal with this issue. The main thing that we are talking here in this context is the fact that there is no space for expression of sexuality, whether it is boys and girls, in a healthy manner. And until and unless that is created, this kind of
Yeah.
demonizing will continue.
Yes, absolutely. What you said, I was going to raise that point as well, that when we don't allow conversations in a normal, healthy manner about, sexuality, the feelings at that point of time, then you're going to see these kind of things. Then you're going to see the youngsters maybe follow the wrong kind of role models, get, influenced by the wrong kind of content they're looking at online or television, whichever way they consume content right now. But the basics don't change. And Mr. Neeraj Kumar, thank you so much for patiently waiting by. The other concern is that if we don't correct it at the initial stages and don't explain to them that this kind of a thinking or mindset is not right, you don't know where the line gets crossed, and you don't know where a simple objectification, joking, humorous conversation about gang rape actually then takes somebody to the point where they don't think twice before even committing that crime.
I fully agree. See, a lot of things have been said by other panelists, which are all very much in order. Uh, First of all, we have to understand that young students or school children, if they are not given sex education right from a very young age, and they are allowed to use social media freely as they grow up, these kind of things is going to happen. It is the kind of bringing up that we do that has a direct bearing on the behavior of the students or of the children, both boys and girls. The second thing is that it is unfortunate that this thing has to come to the door of the police, and the police has to intervene and register cases and take the children to court, whether it is the juvenile justice court or whatever. Uh, that is very unfortunate. It should not have reached that stage. And this can only happen if, as you rightly said, there are conversations, there are discussions, and not only at school between the teachers and the students, but also at home uh, between the parents and the children, and also why they should refrain from misusing the social media. Today, internet is a very, very powerful tool in the hands of all children. They can use it to their advantage to enhance their knowledge, their skills. It helps them in their studies and so on and so forth. But it also has a tremendous negative potential. And that is what is creating all the problem. So it is only through education and repeated conversation with the children that we can ensure that social media and chat groups are not misused or not used to harass or objectify fellow female students and so on. There is no other way except for education.
Okay, yeah, I take your point. There is some amount of education, fixing that has to take place here. But Mr. Neeraj Kumar, is there also, in terms of regulation and policing, that we need to look at something? Because, I mean, this is a different age group. We're talking about teenagers between 13 and 17. A fear of law or punishment or consequences, as well as some regulation of these social media apps and the, what they're talking about there. Is that also, an important part to look at?
Absolutely, that will be a part of the education. The teachers have to explain it to the students that if you cross a certain threshold, you will be liable to legal action. And once that legal action is taken, your entire future can be in jeopardy. So that should be part of the education itself. That should be a part of the conversations that we have with our children at every stage. That they should not ruin their future by indulging in this kind of behavior. It can mar their future prospects It can mar their potential to grow into good citizens and so on and so forth. So the fear of the law or the existence of the laws should also be explained, and the police there can also lend a helping hand in teaching the teachers first that what all are punishable acts and what all can be done to educate children to prevent them from using the social media to the detriment of their own future.
All right, let me go back, to Kalyani Chaudhary on this aspect. Kalyani Chaudhary, and this is what I was, speaking about initially as well. How do we ensure that in school when they're there, in terms of scrutiny, regulation, and education, we do a better job? What needs to change in the way the schools are dealing with this issue?
Yes, Tanvi, I feel that emphasis on values is extremely important. Rather than putting all the emphasis on marks, I think we should give equal importance to the community commitments that each one of us as citizens of this world have. And if we give that equal emphasis to community commitments where everything comes in, whatever the panelists have brought up, whether it is objectifying gender, whether it is, monitoring how children are growing up, whether it is putting regulations, everything can be done through these beautiful sessions, which should be given equal importance by all educators. And believe me, there are schools in our own nation which are doing it very, very well. So I have no concern. Yes, these boys are curious, very curious to know the unknown. And that's why they probably venture into it. So if the school and home together can build the core values of the children very strong, then we know that we have done our job well, and our children will always think twice before they indulge in wrongdoing.
Okay, let me actually also bring in Dr. Raheja back into this conversation. Dr. Raheja, also this needs to be drilled, somehow explained to the youngsters of, how do they find the courage to speak up? Slut shaming, objectification, body shaming, even those things are not acceptable, let alone conversations about rape and gang rape, which are happening. And, outside of that, I'm going to go out and say this, it's not just the boys, even girls are indulging in these kind of conversations, which should not be all right. But in that group, somebody has to find the courage to stand up and say no, to stand up and say this is not okay, let's stop this. Now, how do we go about explaining that to the youngsters?
See, a couple of things. Number one, I think the most important platform to be able to initiate a dialogue like this is the sex education period. Now, from what I understand, all these kids have gone to affluent schools, better schools where I think sex education was allocated in the curriculum. It had a defined period where they needed to attend it. But I think, like Mr. Neeraj Kumar was rightfully saying, it's also teaching the teachers, the comfort that the teachers need to have when addressing a very sensitive issue like sex education. So I think if the teacher is carrying the anxiety about moralistic anxiety about sexual issues in the belly, he or she is going to take that back to the session, to the classroom period, and that's going to lead to an atmosphere which ends up becoming a mockery. It's rather seen as a period of giggling where the boys and girls are just trying to get into very funny mocking looks at each other in the presence of teachers. So the whole idea of the sex education not only gets defeated, I think it takes a negative connotation. So I think it's extremely important that the dialogue begins in the these designated sex education periods, and then it's carried forward to various forums, I mean, in communication with the parents, in communication with the elders at home. And I think, like one of the panelists was saying, the first response in a situation like this is denial. It is brushing under the carpet and hoping and believing that it's not happening in my house. And even if I think the parents end up stumbling upon information like this, the only thing that they want to do is a very light dialogue with the child, and then wanting to just brush things under the carpet. And then when it explodes, it has very grave ramifications. So I think this is not something light, and it does not need to be taken lightly. But I think the responsibility has to be collective. So I think three key stakeholders that we see here is the school, is the parent, and I'm calling the third stakeholder also is the society, where the exposure to media, how collectively we are able to help the child develop and better his impulse control. Because like it has been already said, the internet in the hand of a 10 or 12-year-old is like a very dangerous tool, and he needs to be told how to be able to regulate it and how to be able to use technology to benefit him, and not use it for darker ramifications and the reinforcing of the dopaminergic surge, which can then lead to very dangerous, serious consequences like these.
Yes, absolutely. Beautifully put, Dr. Reja. In fact, I'm going to take that comment to wrap up this conversation and thank all of the panelists who've joined us, viewers. And I think we need to have a lot more of these conversations. There is no point in brushing this under the carpet. There is no point in ignoring it, being in denial, whether you're a teacher or a parent or a principal of an institution or owner of an institution, or part of a society where there are teenagers involved. We need to acknowledge this as step one. And then we need to start talking to the youngsters to explain to them what's right and what's not. We need to inculcate better values in them. It's not about villainizing the teenagers, and I don't want to do that. Perhaps nobody told them better. Perhaps somebody told them it's all right, this is all part of the society, this is what you do when you're 15-year-old. This is how you objectify. This is how you judge somebody's body. This is how you discuss it. And it's normal to joke about rape and gang rape. This normalizing of such conversations, of such locker room talk, has to stop at every level. Because the more you say it's all right, it's no big deal, they're just comments, they're not going to do it, they don't mean it seriously. You don't know where the line gets drawn then. There is no line, and that's concerning. This is the age where they need to be taught to respect each other. And again, I will emphasize, girls and boys. And it is the responsibility of the society, the parents, and the teachers. Let's see how we can make our society better and give better values and education to our youngsters. Thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. Viewers, the Indian government has now decided to bring back our citizens who are stranded across the world due to the pandemic and since the suspension of flights. Now, a huge chunk of these will obviously be coming in from the Middle East. In the first round, the government plans to bring back about 14,600 citizens via 64 flights. There are also ships that are being deployed to bring people back from UAE, from Maldives, and then they will be taken to their home states across the country. Of course, a large chunk will go to states like Tamil Nadu and Kerala, where the preparations have begun. Passengers from United Kingdom will have to pay 50,000 rupees as fare, while from Chicago the fare will be 1 lakh rupees. From Dhaka to India it will be about 12,000 rupees. In all, about 2,300 citizens will land day after tomorrow on May 7th as the first round from about 10 different countries. To begin with, the government is going to be using Air India, and then perhaps they will rope in more airlines. Here is what the aviation minister told us.
We are planning to mount during the first week of the resumption or the commencement of this operation. And I mean the period between May 7 to May 13th. We have worked out those details, and these involve 10 flights from the UAE, 2 flights from Qatar, 5 flights from Saudi Arabia, 7 flights from the United Kingdom, 5 flights from Singapore, 7 flights from the United States, 5 flights from Philippines, 7 flights from Bangladesh, 2 flights from Bahrain, 7 flights from Malaysia, 5 flights from Kuwait, and 2 flights from Oman. This brings the total number of flights that will be operated during the first week to 64. Now, if you have to bring 64 flights in at a time when we are under lockdown, this necessarily involves working out very detailed arrangements with a number of authorities. To start with, the Airports Authority of India, because the airports will have to receive these 64 flights in the first week.